Jesse Homestead. Yeah, no, middle of the week. What am I doing getting out here? Wanted to. I was running through some of the old playlists of GMO versus common sense to see what needed to be updated and so forth. And I ran across a little sniglet and I took some clips out of it that not only reinforces what's wrong with our current system, but also points toward regenerative agriculture. All from a guy who brought you GMOs. Okay? Yeah. So I found it to be a bit interesting. It's kind of cut up a little bit because I didn't want it to. It was a long video, so I wanted to cut it kind of short. But yeah, I think you might have some interest in it. That whole series has a lot of information in it. Okay, anyway, let's get go grab your coffee and we'll get this started. Alrighty, we're back. I'll just kind of cue into this thing, and most of this will be for the gentleman, the initial video. And it was an update, I think, was done like in, 17, something like that, around July. But ran across a long article from a GMO expert. Yeah, he headed up a lot of this nonsense. And now that he's retired, he started singing a different tune. I think you'll find some of it kind of interesting, and it just reinforces what the rest of that playlist is telling you. Y'all been lied to about those things, and don't sweat the GMOs, okay? They're fairly benign. You need to watch the stuff they're spraying on things, okay? And just because the label says non-GMO, doesn't mean it's healthy, okay? Keep that in mind. Remember, the real enemy is the herbicides, okay? And that's being used on a lot of different items. So anyway, let's get on with this video clip, and I hope you have fun with it. Basically, I was asking him the hows and whys he got involved in doing more research on glyphosate. Now, he was a microbiologist. He was involved in GMOs, not the herbicides. Okay, keep that in mind. Said in school I learned about agriculture and the damage caused by all sorts of pests and pathogens, such as insects, fungal diseases, so forth. I learned to deal with those pests by sterilizing the soil or spraying pesticides. Halfway through my career, it became obvious that perhaps we should intervene at the molecular level to make crops naturally resistant to pests, thus his interest in GMOs. So I learned molecular biology and became a genetic engineer. Then I became the head of the molecular biology department and took it as my responsibility to educate people and try to assuage their fears of genetic engineering. Yeah, nothing to see here, folks. Move along. I retired 12 years ago and started gardening as a serious hobby. So I decided to learn something about agriculture. After gaining that hands-on experience, I realized how much damage pesticides cause to the living environment of the soil. I learned all sorts of things that I wasn't taught in graduate school. For example, I learned that not only pesticides, but also regular chemical fertilizers damage the community of microorganisms in the soil. I became organic, so to speak. At that point, I started reading scientific research showing the problems with genetic engineering. Some of us didn't have to wait till then, but... Okay, so the rest of these are going to be questions and how he answered those questions. One of the questions posed to him, what is the current allowable amounts of glyphosate in food and water? And how do they compare with the levels which scientists are detecting as harmful effects? Now this one, if you go back in some of my previous GMO information, you'll find that when the FDA approved back in the 70s for Roundup usage, they had two levels, a 0.5 parts per million, up to 1 point per 1 point per million. That was the maximum that they would allow in food. All right? With those figures in mind, let's move on. Most other pesticides and herbicides are closely monitored by government agencies in Canada and the United States. But for some reason, glyphosate residues have not been monitored closely. Ooh, I know the answer to this one. Let me spell it to you. Money. Apply enough money, and they go away. Monsanto learned this early on. What we do know is that the legal levels allowed by the Environmental Protection Agency, now folks, it's out of the FDA's hands anymore. It's now the EPA. And Health Canada have increased significantly over the past few years, presumably to accommodate for the new reality. The allowable levels are now well above parts per million. Every single crop has an allowable level. Allowable level for glyphosate residue in sugar, 10 parts per million. Soybean and canola, 20 parts per million. Cereals, that includes wheat, rice, oats, okay? 30 parts per million. And this is the one that you really got to think about every time when you had your nice little backyard barbecue, frying up those store-bought hamburgers and so forth. Yeah. Okay. Non-grass fed animals. 400 parts per million. That's what went into your meat, folks. Residual levels that were once considered extreme are now seen as normal. A large number of published scientific studies, mostly done outside the United States, show that as little as 1 part per million of glyphosate will kill most all bacteria, particularly the beneficial bacteria in the gut of animals that where this endocrine disruption begins at 0.5 parts per million. Here again, the FDA said safe to these levels. And that is and that even a few parts per million can cause what they call oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, DNA damage, and many other disruptions in the mammal's organs, cells, and tissue. Wow. Whoops. Another question they asked was, Monsanto, the company that owned the glyphosate patent, claims that humans can digest glyphosate in our food and water and it won't accumulate in our bodies. Is this true? Simple question. That's what Monsanto's been saying all along. Let's see how this fellow that made a career of this, what he has to say. Recent scientific studies clearly show that glyphosate does not degrade easily in soil or in humans or animals. Glyphosate accumulates in all organs, liver, kidneys, intestines, heart, lungs, bones, and so on, of animals and people eating food products made from Roundup Ready crops. And this is how they're going to sell non-GMO products to you. Oats. Companies will tell you a lot of times non-GMO. Okay? Rice, non-GMO. Sugarcane, non-GMO. All these, they're non-GMO. All right? This guy even says that GMO is least of your worries with this stuff. GMOs are relatively benign when it comes to their health risks as a product. You know, as the GMO, pure GMO coming out of that scientific lab. What the problem is what it's grown in and how it's grown. There's where the problems come in. Now, let me talk to you a bit. I'm not going to go into this word for word, but they have, in the past 15 years, they've used glyphosate as a drying agent. Okay, they call it a chemical drying. And they use it widely on sugar. They use it widely on grains, seeds, such as your cereals, beans, sunflowers, and so forth. They use glyphosate to spray the crop to kill it. It also kills the weeds in the crop, makes it easier for them to harvest it. Okay? The process is called chemical drying. A lot of your processed foods are chemically dried. But they can still sell it to you as non-GMO. Doesn't tell you that the damaging part of this stuff is already there. It's been sprayed with it. As I said, sugar, 10 parts per million. Okay. And I'm not going to read this whole article because it's numerous pages long. But was their next question. We were surprised to learn that glyphosate was also patented as an antibiotic. If you'd seen our earlier GMO stuff, you'd have known that. But yeah, they tried to get it as an antibiotic here in this country. It is patented as an antibiotic, but the FDA would not approve it to be used on humans as an antibiotic. Primarily because, son of a gun, it wipes out the good bacteria in your body, just leaving the pathogens left there, and you suddenly have all these health issues. Doggone it. But for some reason, it's okay in the food. His answer is, I call glyphosate an antibiotic masquerading as a herbicide. Aside from its function as a disruptor and the multitude of other documented nefarious effects that it has on the human physiology. Yeah, can't pronounce that word right. I think the most immediate concern is the damaging effect on the human microorganisms. I don't remember seeing much research on the effects of glyphosate in the soil and the environment. I have got that out there in another video where the research is out there, and yes, it is damaging. But he goes on to say, other than the usual industry-sponsored and reassuring results, plenty of anecdotal evidence, however, shows that damaging the soil's microbiology leads to a slow desertification. GMOs, the plant, should not be causing these problems. What's causing it? And as he went down the rabbit hole, folks, he discovered Roundup herbicide. All right, to sum this thing up in a nutshell, basically what this old boy was telling you is he wished he knew now, but back then, what he knows now. He didn't know how soil worked. They didn't understand the soil and the soil biology. And he realizes now they've done a great deal of damage. And he came out with it. Okay? That whole GMO playlist is chock full of stuff like that. Alright? If you haven't went through it, I know some of them get pretty lengthy. Worth checking out. Mainly because they've had this plan for a long time. Okay? That playlist is several years old. Okay? Trying to warn you what's coming at you. Now you're staring down the barrels of it, fellas. It's, ladies, time to wake up. It's not too late to start politically pushing back, but something needs to be done. Okay? This is Rick, Tennessee Homestead. I love you guys and I appreciate you. It's the reason I do this. But I did find it funny that he went from GMO expert down to regenerative agriculture when he found out that everything they were doing was wrong. Something to think about. Catch you guys later. Y'all have a good day.